This is the review everyone has been waiting for, because if you try to look for a US Optics review, every single one of them is connected to US Optics. They're either a sponsored shooter, a brand ambassador, or they received the scope for free, or they're nobody who doesn't know anything about long range and got it for review and thinks it's amazing because it shoots awesome groups at 100 yards. I have used this for PRS. I took this to a national competition down in Texas. I recently shot another competition with it. I've been practicing with it, and I have a lot of good things to say about this scope. First of all, we'll get into the structured part of the review, but I'm just going to get the elephant out of the room, or the elephant in the room out of the way here. The eye box on this is terrible, and most people's first impression of a scope is the eye box. Everyone who gets behind the scope thinks, ugh, that kind of sucks. And yes, the eye box is tight, and the eye relief is extremely short. I have to have a cantilevered mount with a really short length of pull down here so that I can actually get my sight picture right. You know, to be frank, the Razor Gen 3 has a pretty tight eye box too, or as far as eye relief. It's not the end of the world. It is a concern for some people, and I won't disregard people's concerns. If you're really picky about eye boxes and you don't have your rifle set up well to use so that you can just sit your face on the gun and see it, this probably isn't the scope for you. But there's a lot of good things to say about this scope. So let's get started. Field of view is huge on this thing. If you watch Dark Lord of Optics, he talks about field of view. There's the perceived field of view, there's the actual angular field of view, which comes in from the eyepiece. They're different things, and this one, there's just so much to talk about in this, actually. So it is a well-known fact that the USO tunnels at under, I don't know, like 7 power or something. It tunnels, which means you have like what you're seeing in the scope, and then it gets like this dark ring around it, and what you're seeing doesn't increase your field of view as you get farther away. Right, so it tunnels. The reason that tunneling is usually not present in scopes, from what I hear, is that there's a mask in some of the erector sets. Well, I'm not sure about. I'm not an optical engineer. Basically, they compromise your field of view at the upper end of your magnification at like 25x, so that you can have a fuller magnification at low a fuller field of view at low magnification. So what this means is, if this did not tunnel, it wouldn't have as high of a field of view at higher magnification, like 17 to 25 power. So it's kind of a trade-off. You don't get a lot of wide field of view at low power, like really low power, but you do have a wider field of view when you're really dialed up. I would argue for long range, there are arguments for both. I'm seeing a lot of my friends shoot at high magnification. I tend to shoot in the 10 to 12 power right now, but I'm kind of toying with that, trying to figure out what works better legitimately. So I'm doing a lot of testing with that right now. But anyways, the field of view is very large at high power. That's your angular field of view. And then you have your perceived field of view, which is how big that sight picture is in front of your eye. This is my biggest complaint with like the Leupold Mark V, is that it feels so far away because it's got a long eye relief, and I think the ocular lens is kind of small, so it looks like I'm looking through a little tunnel here. Whereas with this, it's really close to my face, which I wouldn't recommend for like a Magnum caliber, but for PRS, it's not a problem. It's really close to my face, which actually means the sight picture is bigger, and I get a better field of view with lower magnification. It's kind of a weird phenomenon, but if you look through this and you shoot through it for a couple stages, and then you look through a Leupold Mark V, you're going to think like, where's the scope? It's just this little tiny pinprick with magnification inside of it. That's just a common issue with the Mark V. My Steiner is better than the Mark V in that respect. My Collis is kind of similar there. But when you hear field of view, there's a lot that goes into it. You can say, what's my angular measurement for field of view versus what am I actually seeing with the eyepiece? And the USO is the biggest I've ever seen. It's very good. The Parallax free zone, I haven't tested it. But it's another one of those scopes that I basically just set it to, try not to bump my table too much. I basically set it to somewhere around like what would be like 500, 300, and it holds true. I can focus on everything pretty much parallax free, you know, from 300 yards out to 1,000 yards or to infinity, whatever. So yeah, the parallax is very good on it. This parallax knob is crazy smooth. So I'm used to a lot of my low scopes from Japan, like the Cronus or the Maven RS4, or even my my Steiner isn't the low scope, but it's also crazy hard. You have to grab this thing and you have to really crank it. Same with my Collis. This I could do with 2 fingers very easily. It's kind of like a Night Force. Very nice. The reticle is the main reason why I wanted this scope in the first place. Back in 2021, I had the Maven RS4 and I was having some problems reading the reticle, so I wanted a new scope that had a better reticle. It was easier to read. And I took a detour from that and got a Tremor 3 in my Steiner. That's not a super easy to read reticle either. But yeah, what I really wanted was this scope. And I ended up buying that Steiner, and a few months later they announced the PR2 reticle for the Leupold. I probably would have gotten that. This one was out of my price range at the time, but I managed to find a good deal on this one, and I bought it, and I love the JVCR reticle. In fact, I'm doing a review on the reticle itself, but I'm just going to pull it up right now anyhow. This is the JVCR reticle, and probably can't see it in super detail, but the wind hashes, you have one, your 0.2 goes up, your 0.4 goes down, your 0.6 goes up, and your 0.8 goes down. So it's easy to just pick it out with your eye, because you're looking through one eye and it's harder to resolve visually anything with just one eye. So being able to distinguish that 0.2 from 0.4 and the 0.6 from 0.8 very easily it translates to faster time acquiring your target. So I loved this reticle. This is the main reason why I wanted this one. It's designed by Jake Vibert. I met Jake Vibert down at Rifles Only a couple weeks ago. He's a cool guy. He's a fantastic shooter. Oh my goodness. Yeah, he did a great job. Moving on from the reticle, I talked about eye relief. Eye box isn't actually that bad from side to side. It is a little bit tighter than some of my other scopes I've had. Again, if your rifle fitment is set up to you, it's not so much an issue. You'll notice on my KRG here, I actually cut my cheek piece almost in half and moved it all the way forward. So I still have clearance, but I've got it set up so that my cheekbone can rest right against the back of this and it indexes perfectly. So I just get my face here, and the second this touches my cheekbone where it should, I'm on target inside my reticle. So make sure that your fitment is good enough where you can pick up your target fast enough. And the eye box shouldn't be too much of an issue. If you have a poorly fit rifle, the scope's not going to be very, it's not going to give you a very good experience. Let's talk about the turrets. The turrets are super interesting, actually. This is a very different design. This is one of the reasons why I don't like to get the Japanese scopes all the time, because they're usually similar designs, because they come out of the same factory. This one, you unscrew this cap right here, and there's like an Allen screw, and you can move your erector down or up without having to dial your scope at all. And so I can keep this at 0, and I can watch my point of impact move up or down, and I can get it tuned to exactly where I want. I'm not driving a pin into a brass post. I'm not limited to, like, if the 0 is off just by like a millimeter, I'm not stuck there. I can move it to exactly where I want. I can tune it perfectly. Plus, it's hard to see, but usually when you dial a scope, the erector rises, or the knob rises. You can kind of see it rising there, and so you'll have these indicators down here of what revolution you're on. So I could technically be pretty far up in my revolution cycle and then dial down on the interior, and I can actually see this revolution. One of the original problems I had, this is actually my second USO, but on my first one, it was the the knob was all the way down, and so I couldn't see it because my, what do you call these? Oh my gosh, my mount was in the way of the numbers. So I could technically dial that screw down, and it'll push the erector down, and I can have my knob still elevated pretty high. It's kind of a different feature, a little more scientific. It needs a little bit more explanation sometimes. I didn't do it justice, but I mean, it's interesting and it works and it's different, and I kind of like it in its own way. It's not as easy as some of my other stuff I've had. I really liked my Maven. It was completely toolless. It was good. Also, you may have noticed as I was dialing, the sound is just a little bit different. As I dial up, it's more of a smooth, thuddy sound. As I come down, it's a little more clicky. If you're a stickler about ergonomics and you don't like that, then this scope isn't for you. If you don't care, like I do, or like I don't, then yeah, the scope is good. Something I did for the first time down at Rifles Only was I dialed my wind, because all the stages only had one target, which is kind of rare nowadays. Jake Vibbert had some things to say about the range there. He's like, if you shot this match once, you've shot it a million times. Nothing changes. He's like, they set this match up like 10 years ago and it's never changed. So yeah, one target distance. Kind of out there in the eastern area where there's a lot of air, a lot of mirage, and just single targets with fast acquisition times. We had to shoot 15 shots in 2 minutes sometimes. I actually dialed my wind this time. I've never dialed my wind before, and actually this scope is very good for dialing wind. These turrets are very, very positive. They're very legible. It's got a capped windage. I really like the capped windage. I'm not going to bump it if I don't want to bump it, and it's not going to screw me over. So if you're into capped windages, Leupold Mark V, Night Force, USO, they're going to be your best friends. Alright, so that talks about turrets. I actually like how low profile they are. I'm one of those losers that actually likes the way this scope looks. It's got like 2 angles on the objective lens. It's kind of got this goofy teardrop design. I love it. I love how short these turrets are. You can call me basic, but I just love them. Going in, let's look at failure points or what kind of protections and stuff. I don't know. It's got capped windage. USO has a long history of being tough. Some of their QC doesn't have the greatest history, especially when they were doing custom stuff, like bespoke stuff, or when they were switching factories and things, but with Foundation I haven't had any issues. I haven't run it long enough to really say it's perfect. Jake Vibbert's been running USO since like well before 2015, and he's really only had one failure on one of the scopes. He's had failures on, like everyone has failures, but his failure was some grease kind of got down on one of the lenses because it was hot. That's not really that bad. He's never had tracking issues, which I would argue being able to look through your scope, like not even being super clear, but being able to look through your scope and see something and being able to track are the most important things. And he's never had a problem with those. No canted reticles, etc. My personal experience, I don't feel like it's deep enough to give you guys an actual claim on how durable they are. I don't do any crazy tests either. But I think it's more durable than a lot of Vortex scopes. I'll just say that. I've had 3. I've had a Vortex scope really kill me on a stage. I've had a friend who had 3. I borrowed one. Each of his 3 vortexes have gone down. He's never had a razor, so I'm not going to talk about razors. I think razors are made to a different level, but like the PST, the PST2, the Strike Eagle, they're all going to break before this thing does. Moving on to what I call the sweet spot size, or everyone talks about chromatic aberration, but I feel like spherical aberration doesn't get any attention. If you have, let me pull that up again. Oh, you probably heard that. Sorry about the bumps. So, if this is your sight picture, all scopes will have a bit of spherical aberration, which is kind of like a fuzzy or distortion here around the edge. And what will happen a lot of the time on cheaper scopes is the distortion starts around here. So everything looks awesome and clear where you're looking, but kind of off on the peripherals, it's kind of fuzzy. And it's got a fisheye look is what people call it. Now, most of the cheap scopes I've had will have kind of a sweet spot here. And then some of the Japanese scopes will kind of, like, they'll start maybe a little bit further out, but there's still a pretty significant amount. And then in the German optics I've had, and in this scope, it's really kind of just that last 20% of your vision, or less. This scope, honestly, the spherical aberration is on par with my Steiner M7XI and with my Collins K525i. But I can't tell a difference. I think optically, at least at 100 yards, where I'm actually paying attention to like fine details, I think this may be better than the Steiner. Last time I took them both out, I was kind of surprised. We don't talk a lot about the US optics as far as optical quality go. If you look back at some of the older LR and ER, I don't know their model numbers. Some of their older stuff wasn't the best optically. It was more known for the robustness, kind of like a Night Force. But I think with the B series, and especially the Foundation series, the optical quality is fantastic. I don't see any chromatic aberration, not with snow, not with white targets. I don't see any spherical aberration. The actual sharpness of the image, I hate to say the word sharpness, but at 100 yards, you can pick out the details on paper better on this than I can with my Steiner. Yeah, I think it's optically a great scope. So that talks about the spherical aberration. Parallax range is 50, actually more like 75 yards and forward. At Rifles Only, they did this goofy stage where I had to shoot cards at 40 yards. I had a hard time focusing. I also dialed the wrong way, so I didn't lose that stage because of the scope. That was because of me. But it was blurry at 40 yards. This is not an NRL-22 scope. This is a long-range scope. You're going to have a hard time if you try to use this at close ranges. If you need to do something like that, I'd get something like this. I've got the Warn rings. You could put like an MRO or something up here so you can do your short-range stuff. But heck no through the scope. Going over to tunneling. Yes, it has tunneling at about 7 power. It is what it is. I already talked about it. Zeroing function we talked a little bit about with it's not going to put a dimple in a brass knob. It's not using like little notches to kind of fit into. You can actually tune this kind of like you'll be able to do with the Razor Gen 3 and some of the other scopes. You can tune this specifically to match up your zero perfectly to a line. Let's see, zero stop settings. It has a zero stop in here. I didn't actually set the zero stops. I know some people have hated on the zero stops. What I did was I just took the big Allen key and just moved it to 0. And the zero stop's already set, so like I'll have to do a review on the zero stop. I should mess with it sometime, but as is, I didn't have a problem with it. Zero stop works. I think zero stops are more of an issue for MOA scopes and for ELR shooters. Depth of field is really good. So I talked about the parallax setting. You can set it pretty far, pretty short. It doesn't really make too much of a difference, which means it's got good depth of field. I can see things in a wide range from close to far, and it's all in focus. That's always nice. Once again, I like the way this looks. I really liked their older models, like the ER, LR7, whatever they were. And they had like 2 knobs up here. This Warn, if I were to get one of those and just buy it used, I would totally put it in this Warn mount because it's got space for it. It's got kind of a goofy offset here. If you look at it, you'll notice that the windage knob and the parallax knob are not parallel with each other. It's kind of ugly in a way, but what if I told you sometimes ugly features are kind of cool? I don't know. I'm a sucker for it. I understand if you don't like it. I understand. The size, this thing is too long to use in so many situations. I actually like the way it looks. I'm goofy again. I like this. I like the way the Mark V does it too, just the really long objective. Problem is, I can't run the enclosed forend on this, because if I try to run the enclosed forend on this KRG, it bumps this. And so I have to push the scope way, way back, and then I get problems. If I push it back that far, I've only got like half an inch gap between the bolt knob and this. So that is a problem if you want to run some of those extended, or the, more especially the KRG one. I feel like their night vision ramp comes up really far. I think, yeah, in fact, I know that the JVCR, I'm getting all my names mixed up now. I know for a fact that this will not interfere with the XLR JVM Pro kit, because, I mean, this is what Jake Vibert runs. He runs it with that night vision stuff. So just be aware that if you're going to run the night vision stuff up here, you might need a taller mount so you can clear it, because this thing is stupid long. The weight is pretty standard. It's like that 34, 35 ounce range. Most 56 millimeter scopes will be in that, aside from like the Razor, a couple other overbuilt scopes. And reticle choices are good on this. I can get any of the Tremor 3, Horus, whatever. I can get the Gap reticles. I can get some of the weird custom ones they've got. I'd love it if I could get... Honestly, I wouldn't mind having the PR2 in here, or the Mil XT reticle available for it, or even one of the like EBR7C scopes, reticles in here. That would be cool. But they do have a fantastic array of things you can choose from, and honestly, I don't think you need all the choices, because if you get something other than the JVCR, something's wrong with you mentally. So that kind of talks about most of the things. A couple of caveats that I have had with this scope. I had one before. I sold it and regretted it. Or I didn't sell it. I traded it for a Collis, and I put that one on my 22, and I was like, I want that thing again. So this is my second US Optics Foundation. A couple of differences between the two is that these hash marks on the turret don't quite line up. So I've got it on 0 right now, but as I go to 0.5, it's just on the left side of that. So I think the printing is a little bit off. That's kind of a ding on there. I think US Optics should figure that out. I could probably call them and ask for a different turret or something, but it doesn't matter to me that much. If it matters to you and you really need to be precise, then double check it if you get one. And if it's a problem, I would contact them. They can always just replace this erect turret. It should be able to come off. Their customer service is fantastic. The other thing that is different from my first one versus the second one is as I turn this mag ring, which is very, very smooth. I don't need to throw lever on this at all. It's very smooth. Just kind of like my Steiner. Smoother than my Collas. Way smoother than almost every other optic I've had. There's a slight hitch in there. There's something must have a burr. But you can't hear it. It doesn't stop it, but you can feel it kind of it's not grinding, but it's catching on something in there. It's not a problem to me. Obviously, I'm still running the scope, but I think fit and finish on these scopes is maybe just a little bit lacking. I like their anodizing, but I think that is just a little bit lacking for them. Something to be aware of. So overall, I really like this scope, and I want to get rid of my Steiner and get another one. I've got a Gap Tempest coming in this week. That's going to be my second rifle. And I kind of want to put another one of these on there, because I love the field of view. This turret is very easy to click, very easy to move. It's not going to move without me trying to move it. It's got capped windage. I like the looks. It's fun to run something that's a little bit different, and optically it's really good. So I think that this is an excellent option for a scope. One of the dings that it gets is the price. For $3,600 this goes for. I mean, for an extra, what? Less than a percent extra. Is that a percent? No. Less than 5% extra, I can get a ZCO. That's something to think about. If you really like the JVCR, then get this. If you have the extra money, you might consider getting that ZCO. If you are LEO or MIL, or you have like a cert, then this is a fantastic scope. I personally would take this over a Night Force, personally, but I'm not a Night Force lover. If you are, then do what works by you. So I think the price is kind of a deterrent. I think it's worth the price. I just think that for that price, there are better options. So that's all I got to say about this scope. Finally, a review that isn't sponsored. Finally, man, looking at these things, it was impossible to find a good review. I hope this helps you guys. I hope that I've revealed the cons to it and the pros, and that you can make